Hello, I'm Alex Dyer, Candy Ordinary here for the Episcopal Church in Colorado, and I am with Stephanie Spellers. And Stephanie Spellers, who are you?
Alex Dyer, I am your friend. Besides that, I serve as the Presiding Bishop's Canon for Evangelism, Reconciliation, and the Care of Creation. And there's some work going on right now in my apartment here in New York, so if you hear voices, it's not in my head. It's actually going on out here. So.
Well, thank you for being here in the midst of all this. I appreciate that. And you've actually got some history with Colorado as well. You were at our clergy conference, not this past one, but the one before, and had some great conversation before I got here, but I have heard about it. And I just want to kind of follow up with that. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what you've been up to since? Brought you on here mainly because you did a wonderful letter on July 4th along with a few of your colleagues, and I wanted to highlight that as well. So that's been going on, and a lot of stuff's been going on in our country as well. So catch us up to from where we were way back then with the Episcopal clergy in Colorado to where we are now.
All right. So it was wonderful being with you all. Now, I think it was the week before Bishop Kim's consecration.
It was.
So we were calling it the octave, if you will. So, and sorry, friends, I'm just recording. Hey. So it was right before her consecration. I, of course, had gone to college with Bishop Kim. At Wake Forest University, where both of us had really powerful encounters and understandings, developed our understandings of race, and functioning in majority white spaces. So it was a joy, honestly, to be with you all and to have those conversations. And honestly, like as I recall, to be with especially your clergy, to say, just because you have a Black woman bishop doesn't mean you've kicked racism. If anything, it means that you're probably about to start on a journey of a fresh understanding of how racism functions in your midst. So in a way, I almost want to turn the question to you and invite people around you to ponder, what have we been discovering together about race, about whiteness, about our systems, about privilege, about what we project onto Black people, Native people, Latino people. I think sometimes you have to have someone in close proximity in order to really know what do we really think about this particular difference or this particular group. It's easy to do it in the abstract. Now you've got a Black leader right there. I'm certain that your questions as a diocese have shifted.
Yeah, as I think the Episcopal Church has shifted too. We've also Black presiding bishop as well.
True that.
So you wrote some very powerful words along again with two of your other colleagues on July 4th, and you chose that date intentional to release that letter.
We did.
And tell me a little bit about that and some of the reaction that you've gotten to that letter.
Yeah, so I got together with two of my dear sister colleagues, sisters in the spirit, Winnie Varghese, who's the priest for social justice work at Trinity Church Wall Street here in New York, and we had also corralled our dear friend and in many ways mentor, Kelly Brown Douglas, who's the dean of Episcopal Divinity School at Union Theological Seminary. She's also the canon theologian at Washington National Cathedral.
And she also preached at Bishop Kim's.
That's right. Well. Yeah. And she wrote a book that many people have turned to in this time of racial reckoning and uprising. Her book is called Stand Your Ground, Black Bodies and the Justice of God. So the three of us are constantly in conversation. And approaching the 4th of July, we were like, we kind of feel like maybe we want to say something to our church and through our church to the nation. And so what we said was, you really want to be free? You really want to mark freedom? It's not about the flags we wave or the songs we sing. It's about whether or not we can get free of white supremacy as a church and as a nation. So we kind of threw that down. We looked back at the example of Frederick Douglass, who of course wrote and delivered his own powerful address in 1852 on the 5th of July to a group of abolitionists, saying to them, they had invited him to speak. And he's like, why did you invite me to speak on the, like to your Independence Day? Independence for you is not independence for me. The day that you celebrate, I still mourn because my people are still in chains. So what we kind of realized was it's true today. The chains look different. Now it's mass incarceration. Now it's a stand your ground culture that allows the murder of Black and brown and Native people by the authorities sworn to protect us. But it's, a lot has changed, a lot hasn't. And if we really want to get free, we're going to have to deal with what hasn't changed.
So I'd be interested to know some of your reaction. It seems like you're probably causing a little bit of discomfort in people, I suspect. I'm sure some people raved about it, but I'm sure some people, there had to be some blowback. Come on now.
We've heard it all. We've heard it all. I will say that we posted this on Facebook. So we started out just kind of put it up on Facebook. And Alex, I think like it went primarily on my page. And there were almost 1,000 shares within like a day and a half. It was out of control. And I don't take it to be anything about me or my popularity. Like people were just putting it out there and then other people were grabbing it. I think we spoke honestly, we spoke theologically. Everything we said, we rooted in scripture, we rooted in our understanding of Jesus and of church. And of what the baptismal covenant. We were very clear, like we had 3 distinct actions that we invited people to take. We said that freedom requires truth-telling. So please engage in your congregations and in your personal life and in your diocese in telling the truth about our church's complicity in white supremacy and oppression. And it's many guises, not just about slavery. I'm sure that Colorado has stories to tell about Native peoples who were displaced, who were exterminated, that you might be where you are doing the ministry you do.
Yep.
So we said truth-telling has to happen to get free. We also have to actively work to let go of white supremacy, understanding that. And I just want to, you didn't ask it, but I'll say, one of the things we've heard a lot from folk is, what do you mean by white supremacy? What do you mean by whiteness? Because we were very free with those terms. And the thing that I've had to remind people is that America, from before there was an America, America has been dedicated to the purpose of white flourishing. So for people who are like, white supremacy, what do you mean I have to get free from that? I'm not shackled by it. It's like, we are living in a culture dedicated to a nation dedicated to the project of the flourishing of white people. And while there are plenty of people of color across this nation, always have been, we have always been here serving insofar as we were allowed to be present, it was at the service of white flourishing.
Yeah.
That is what white supremacy in my mind means. And so what we've said is, like, when you are in a nation, as a white person especially, if you're in a nation that is designed for the purpose of white flourishing, you have to make a choice. You have to actually make a choice about whether or not you will be passive in the presence of that or whether you will dismantle it. And if you are passive in the presence of it, then you are actually now complicit in the system. Desmond Tutu has been quoted saying, you may have heard this, Alex, that, what is it? If the elephant has his foot on the neck of the mouse, that the mouse does not appreciate your neutrality. So we just said, we're like, please get the training, do the formation necessary to understand whiteness and white supremacy, and then to define another way of being. And finally, we said you have to be born from above, kind of thinking Nicodemus, thinking about, how will I be born again? How will I be born from above? change these systems. And for us, we said especially that means reimagining policing and criminal justice so that the reign of white supremacy over Black, brown, and Native and Asian bodies would finally end. So we put all that out there. And of course, a lot of people have gotten hung up on, I'm not a white supremacist, you're a racist. Like we've heard that, straight out, you're a racist. One of my favorite quotes, one of my favorite comments on Facebook, you can't make this up, Alex, was a woman who wrote and said, she was writing, I guess, to me and Kelly and Winnie, all three of us being women of color and dark complected. She wrote, so now they want to, they want to get rid of whiteness. So you want to get rid of all the self-discipline, the industry, the industriousness, what did she say? Basically the intelligence, the virtue, she used the word virtue, of America, do that and see how fast America drops or dies. She said, this is the reason no one put you in charge.
Wow.
And so it was a perfect encapsulation of how white supremacy works, is this belief that only white people are industrious, self-disciplined, virtuous, intelligent. Like, wow, she just said it.
Well, and I think the challenge though is because there's many people probably listen and say, well, I would never say something like that. I would never do that. So, and I'm not, burning a cross on people's lawn or doing a part of that too. So, I'm a good Christian. I'm a good Episcopalian. I have perhaps I have Black friends. So therefore, I'm good. And I'm overstating a little bit too, but I think there are people that kind of struggle with a little bit about, they have this really notion of white supremacy, and it's an extreme. I think it plays out a little. And I'd particularly like to know, I think we could talk probably for ages about how it plays out in society. But if we could focus in a little bit on churches in general, especially the Episcopal Church.
Oh, yes.
And say, how do you see it kind of playing out there? And you talked a little bit about that. What role do we have, and what do we perhaps need to give up as a part of that, or take?
I was dreaming, not even just dreaming. I was kind of lying in bed, sort of just reflecting and prayerfully reflecting, I'd say, last night, knowing that we'd be having this conversation. And the thing that comes back to me, Alex, and we've had this conversation for years, is worship. That I believe that white supremacy is most visible in Episcopal life when you look at our approach to worship. Here's why, or here's what I see. First of all, the degree to which we become chauvinistic whenever we talk about worship. And this is true for Episcopalians of every race, that it's not only something white people do, but it is a function of whiteness, that we present our worship as the best, as the only. We have very low tolerance for any worship style or expression or culture, hear me now, that does not match up with what we do. So for instance, we've all heard people say, oh, well, I could never be in worship with a guitar. Why? Do you just not like guitars? No, it's that you've been told that somehow there's only one way to talk to God or sing to God, and a guitar can't be a part of it. We think that organ music is the pinnacle, sounds like angels. Why? It's like, because that's the English choral tradition. That's the English Anglo-Saxon tradition. And we have been the bearers of that. And so while we think of it as kind of neutral, we're like, well, it's just our aesthetic. Nothing is ever just our aesthetic. We've been trained to believe that certain cultural forms are superior, not just preferred, but superior. And if you don't think we act like they're superior, look at Episcopalians cringe. Look at how often we cringe in the presence of anything that's not ours. I am embarrassed to see, when I see Episcopalians talking about worship with other traditions, and certainly with other cultural and racial groups. because we sound like racists. And we act like it's an aesthetic choice, but it is entirely informed by a white supremacist system that we just live and move and have our being inside.
I can even circle back around to your Facebook comment in the sense of, I've heard people describe music. Well, those songs are not very sophisticated. They're very simple. Very simple.
Very simple. They're not theologically sophisticated enough for me. And like, I beg your pardon, there's some deep stuff going on in a lot of those songs, and spirituals, in songs coming out of base communities in Latin America. So, but again, like it's such an easy thing that trips off the tongue. To say, well, it's just not sophisticated enough for my taste. It's much too simple. Or it's not Episcopal. I love that. When people say, well, we don't worship like that. We don't clap hands. We don't do this. We don't do that. Why? Well, it's just not Episcopal. Yeah. Like, you could substitute it's just not white in for almost anything that qualifies for that. It's not Episcopal. And we don't name it.
Yep.
We don't name it.
Well, I think so. It's interesting. Just a little side note. I've had conversations with churches across Colorado, and COVID, I think, has changed a lot of that.
Yeah.
Maybe not this in particular, but things that they thought they would never be doing.
Yes.
One priest told me a story of how they went to a church and where we worshiped for convention had screens that came down. And he went over to his leadership and he said, hey, can we, this would be a great idea to have at our church. And what did the leadership say? No, we don't do that. We're Episcopalians.
Right. Yeah. We don't do screens.
Well, guess what he was talking about at his last vestry meeting? Screens. So yes, where to put the screen. So, contactless thing, I think recording music, all that kind of stuff, I think is opening up to do. But I want to shift us back a little bit too, because I suspect some of the feedback you got, and leaders get a lot of times, the idea of being too political. So I want to talk a little bit about some P words here, some words that begin with P. So I want to talk a little bit, how do you see the difference between political and partisan? And then I throw in the word pastoral and prophetic. So that's a lot of words there. So political, partisan, pastoral, and prophetic. Because I think they're all kind of interrelated, at least in my mind.
They are.
Tell me what you're thinking about those words. When people say those words, I don't want to church shouldn't be political.
This is not a pitch to go buy the book or whatever, but I wrote a chapter for a book that came out recently on, I think it was on political preaching, basically preaching and politics. Yeah. And the chapter that I wrote was especially about being prophetic in the pulpit. And
it's a great book. And I have to say, I wrote a chapter in it as well. So.
There you go. How about that? I gave you that opening.
I will do a shameless plug for it. So, first of all, go on, buy the book. Great book.
Right on. But the thing that I was kind of working out there, I was grateful for the opportunity to really do some deeper thinking about what do we mean when we say prophetic or political or partisan, all of those words, and why is it that we often oppose those to pastoral? So yeah, I could go for a while on this.
Yeah.
The brief comment that I'll make is that, first of all, the P word pastoral, I think, sometimes holds us hostage. That people think pastoral equals being nice or not ruffling feathers. And in general, church leaders tend to be very conflictual. Yep. And I don't want to start a fight. I don't want fights at all. But I'm also not afraid of conflict. And I think we could all use, kind of look again at our Ron Heifetz, models around adaptive change, and the idea that conflict, not all conflict is bad. That actually a lot of transformation only happens, growth, development, conversion, only happens when we move toward that which is difficult or painful. But you have to know you're loved. So my thing is being pastoral is walking people through change and loving them deeply the whole time. If people know they're loved, they can take all kinds of risks. If they don't know they're loved, that's when the political looks and feels painful. That's when the prophetic looks self-serving.
Mm.
Like, I'm not a fan of self-serving prophecy, where someone stands up and says, I just had to say these things and I don't care if you can't hear it. I'm like, well, if nobody can hear you, then why are you talking? That's rather self-serving. So it's like, no, you should be speaking and offering a word that people can hear, and if like, meet them where they are. But so prophecy is not only, I had to be honest and damn the consequences. Like, well, that's not actually prophecy.
Self-righteousness.
It's self-righteousness, exactly. And of course, when it comes to being political, there's this dude, 2,000 or so years ago, he got killed. And it was because he was constantly messing around in political stuff and reminding people that God is Lord of all, including of our political life. I follow that guy.
Yeah.
You follow that guy. Anybody with the word Episcopal attached to them follows that guy, of course, being Jesus. So there's no being Christian without being political. It just doesn't exist. I'm sorry. Like, for anybody who thinks, again, if you ask the mouse who is lying there and there's an elephant with his foot on the mouse's neck, if you say to that mouse, I'm not really political, or even I'm not really partisan, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality.
Yeah.
The mouse will not appreciate your non-partisanship. There are moments when we simply have to say something, when we simply have to take sides. Jesus did. God is constantly throughout Scripture choosing sides, not hating, not stopping the love. The love travels all the way across every end of the spectrum. But our bodies will sometimes need to move more toward the side that is suffering. And that's Christianity 101.
Well, I think there's also the incarnational aspect that when Jesus was able to interact with people and talk to people, and he was heard, and he both listened to, and I think that kind of back and forth. So I love that kind of aspect. He said, speaking the truth in love. I once heard one time that it was at a diocese convention, not this diocese, but another diocese. The idea of speaking the truth in love, that we often speak love, but not the truth. We speak truth without the love.
Right on.
So to kind of keep those both in balance, I think during this time, I think is important, because we are a very politically diverse state in a very part of this country, but in particular Colorado, very purple state. So we had people moving in and coming in, and then we've had all kinds of different viewpoints here that we hear in the office of the bishop as well, and holding all those kind of in tension. But I think, really listening to each other, I think is an important thing. And we get caught sometimes in this partisan, oh, I know where you're going. All right. I'm going to stop listening type of thing too, but really to speak that truth in love.
I think curiosity is the spiritual virtue that there are many we need to cultivate, but one of them is curiosity. I hope I never lose the curiosity about what everybody is thinking and experiencing, how they got to where they are. I used to be a journalist. And so it's very natural for me to ask questions and to just wonder, to do it's what the kids do. Is it in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd? Is that the one where, you ask those wondering questions?
Godly play. Yeah,
godly play. Yeah, as well. The Montessori method, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like we would all do well to ask more I wonder questions of ourselves and of others. And meditate on the life and teachings of Jesus. And you will see a trajectory where, like, you actually don't have to do as much wondering if you're rooted in him. He was our, like, it makes life hard for us, but Jesus was quite clear on a lot of things that we are not.
So I hear you saying that we need to be curious. We need to become rooted in Jesus and come from a place of love and truth telling to try to find that balance between the two, and I think discover, if I could be so bold as, discover the truth about ourselves, the truth about church,
Yes.
and our role and everything
Yes.
that we are a part of,
Yeah.
and to own that and to live in the discomfort, because sometimes we, as this and many other things, when it gets uncomfortable, we kind of go, and I'm out.
Yeah. And that's the nature, that's another part of white privilege. Being able to say, yeah, I'm not liking this, so I'm going to leave now. And I don't have to be curious about this anymore. Like, people of color have to be curious about white folk, because so much of our life and culture, so much of power around us is controlled by white people. I hope that a part of what we're seeing in this day and age is a moment when white folk get really curious about how is it that I come to be white? What does whiteness mean? What is white supremacy? Like, don't ask me, find out for yourselves.
Well, and my hope is that the curiosity doesn't end in this moment. I think we're in a particular moment, and my hope is that this is sustainable.
Yeah.
It's not when the next thing comes up in the next news cycle, we don't divert our attention to that, because I think that's a little bit of the adversary coming in, trying to draw our attention away from this and really doing the deep work that we need to do. Because I think, we are called this particular time here in the Episcopal Church to do something. I mean, all the stars seem to be aligning. Yes.
The moon is in the 7th house. Jupiter is aligned with Mars.
I'm gonna
I pray.
Yeah.
I do believe that is true, actually, and it's what gives me so much hope.
Yeah.
Is that people are willing to, they're finding their words, they're stumbling around. Alex, I love seeing people stumble. I love seeing us be a learning community. I love seeing us admit, I don't know.
Now I know why you hang out with me. It's all becoming
because we both do it. So I love hearing people sing, and I mean this metaphorically and literally. I love hearing people sing songs they've never sung and sing them badly. To me, that's a sign that the Spirit drove you to a place that you would not have chosen. And it means that I feel like God rejoices when we're looking around like, I don't know where I am. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what's next. The wilderness, we call it. Like, I feel like God is so excited when we step into that space, because God is like, so you need me now, don't you?
Yep. Our bishop has said, basically said, if you're not uncomfortable, then you're probably not following Jesus. And I think there's some truth to that.
Amen.
So well, thank you. It's been a great conversation.
Always.
Like all these, I could go on forever and ever and ever, especially with you. It's always great to see. Thank you for your letter and your words that you and Winnie and Kelly provided. I think it was prophetic to the church, and I hope that people will hear it and listen to it. You can read it. You can catch it on there on YouTube as well, and many great things happening. So thank you for all the work that you continue to do in the church, on the Presiding Bishop staff. You are a true blessing to this church. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And you all are to me. I pray for you. I pray for your bishop, my sister Kim, from my demon deacon sister. And I know that we are on our way toward becoming beloved community. And I will be looking to you all and praying for you on the road.
May it be so. Take care.
God bless.